Well, greetings everybody. Welcome to our King's channel. Today I'd like to discuss Hebrews chapter 10 along with a couple other scriptures as well. And I'd like to say that Timothy P just put out a new video that I think everybody that claims they are a believer should watch. It concerns inviting things you should not have into your home, and you don't want these things taking place, and he brought out a little part about how movie stars, it's a pretty well-known fact that we'll just say the majority of them are quite devout Satanists, eating plates of human manure and drinking goblets of urine and such. These ones I don't think I would even invite into my home. There's very few I do allow into my home. And it's only because I have great hopes that they may hear the truth and turn from their wicked and evil ways. But anyway, let's run through Hebrews chapter 10 real quick. I have a way that my King has showed me, I hope, to be able to elaborate to everybody what Hebrews chapter 10, especially verse 1, but we'll go down through a few verses to show that, what's being said and then misread by so many people. And none of the churches have this story correct. Let me read it real quick here. Hebrews 10:1, for the law, the give or take 613 commandments, also known as the laws. If you keep each and every one of them that pertain to you, then you are keeping the 10 commandments. And therefore, when you keep the two greatest commandments in the law, to love your Father above all things, and then it goes on even further to honor the Son as you would honor the Father. Otherwise, you don't honor the Father. And you can't do that if it's a Trinity where the Father and the Son are the same being and posturing the Jesus or whatever. I still can't understand that Catholic doctrine. I never did, though I was forced to believe it and recite it. But anyway, it says, for the law, having a shadow of the righteous things to come. So the law is just a shadow of the righteous things that are going to come about because you have been keeping the law. Though it may not be apparent to you right now, you may be stuck in seclusion, such as I am, but even in a worse state with an unbelieving spouse or living with unbelieving parents or things of this sort. And it can be very difficult, but believe you me, there's always the invisible hands that are there to guide us through life. And I'm telling you, today was real tough on me. I thought my computer had got fried by a virus or something, and it felt like I got punched right in the stomach. I was sick. I didn't know quite what I was going to do. And I said, well, Yahshua, it's in your hands. If you're allowing, the devils or whatever to kill my computer, well, so be it. I know you got something else in store for me, so, I'll just do the best I can with the time I got. Then I went out and I watched Timothy P's new video 2 times, hoping I could figure out a way to be able to speak as much as he does about things in such a short amount of time as he does. Pertinent things that pertain to life. But the law, it's a shadow of the righteous things to come. You don't see it completely. You live by every one of these laws that pertain to you, and people think you lost it, You're not running on all 6 cylinders or something. And much of the time, they claim you can't even be trusted. But these laws, they're a shadow of what's to come. Our Father said He's going to wipe the tears from our eyes. There's not going to be no more sorrow, no more suffering, no more pain. Ain't going to be no agony. Isn't going to be any sin there. No one's going to become a traitor to you or sell you out or whatever they do, These things aren't going to take place when you have this law written in your inward part, which is the first commandment, to love your Father above all things. And He wants you to be in that new covenant, which is to have the every living word written within your heart and your mind and your soul and your every fiber of your DNA. Your every thought should be focused upon keeping the law the best that you can and being there to help others see that they should do the same. Now this law, it's just a shadow of things to come and not the very image of the things to come. No, I mean, you're practicing these things. People want to spit on you, call you names. They fire you because you won't work Sabbath. You get blacklisted. No one wants to pick you to play on their team anymore. But you're keeping the faith, okay? Which only comes by keeping the laws. Otherwise, the faith is a false faith, a false hope. There is no hope in sin. For the law, having a shadow of the righteous things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. Okay, such as like for Passover and the feasts of unleavened bread, the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Pentecost. For the feast, the high priest usually would offer an animal for the sins of himself and the sins of the entire congregation. But those sacrifices did not bring salvation. These laws were added to the law because the tabernacle in the wilderness was built, and there had to be laws concerning the Levites. Many of the laws within the give or take 613 commandments deal with these Levitical priesthood laws. Law 25, the priest must light the 7-lamp lampstand. Exodus 27:20 through 21. We don't do that on earth today, but our King, if you keep the commandments, and I guess we should start there, my friends. In 1 Yachanan 2 verse 3, or 1 John 2 verse 3, if you haven't heard this before, please take it to heart. Weep and mourn. Now by this, we know that we know him. Well, this up here says the test of knowing Christos, and then under this paragraph says the test of knowing him. Who? Well, Messiah. It speaks of up here, just with the wrong name. Now by this we know that we know him, the true Messiah, if. Now that's a if, it's conditional. If we keep his commandments. Answer honestly. Do you keep the laws and commandments? Do you keep the feast days? Do you keep the seventh day holy and not go to church on first days? Do you steal or do you lie? Well, if you say you don't lie, but you say you know the Jesus and you even preach to people and want to convert them to the Jesus, or even if you're calling on Yahshua or Yeshua or Yehoshua and you're not keeping the commandments, well, you're simply calling on something you don't understand, and it can work against you. Because it says here in verse 4, he who says, I know him, I know the Messiah, and does not keep his commandments. All right? You're a liar, and the truth is not in you. Now, the word truth here, you could also substitute commandments. You can substitute law or laws. You could substitute love. You could substitute word. They all mean the same thing. They're all within the every living word, my friends. And if you don't keep the commandments, if you're not looking forward to the feasts, if you're not keeping today, if you're watching this on the 22nd of July, between Friday at sundown and Saturday at sundown, well, that is the Sabbath. And if you're not keeping it holy, well, I wear the tassels, the seats, the fringes, or the lots. I wear them. I wear them everywhere I go. I know the holy Malachim, those invisible hands that guide us through life. They see what's on my breeches here, on my garments. Do you have them on yours? Do you eat butter and honey? Do you think you know him and yet you do not keep his commandments? So anyway, to get to the point that I really want you to understand greatly, okay? Now, my brother David, before he passed away, had sent me this in the mail. Now, of course, the unit had came with it, but let's just pretend this came by itself. The same way as every one of you out there, if you know a child, see if you can buy that child a bicycle or a tricycle, depending on their age, and make sure it comes in a box with the instruction manual there and everything. You know how to put it together, how this law fits with that law. You take the tire law, you put it into the fork law, you apply pressure to the bolt, creating the law of firmness on the tire so it don't fall off when you ride. And what you do is you take the manual and you put together that bicycle and you hide it. And then you give the child the manual for the bicycle or the tricycle and say, hey, learn this by heart. When you learn the manual by heart, you'll receive something you can't hardly imagine. And so it was with every appliance we get. We get these manuals, these instruction manuals. And I tell you, I read through here, I found out that if I didn't plug my aroma, cook everything thing here, whatever pot, if I didn't plug it in the wall like it said so in the instruction manual, it don't work. It don't cook anything. Isn't that amazing? And there's other things in here too that if I didn't know, I could probably kill myself if I didn't read the instructions that came with that free gift. The same thing with Mr. Coffee. You get the Mr. Coffee pot out, you don't know exactly what you're supposed to do, but it's supposed to make coffee. Well, what you do is you look into the Mr. Coffee pot maker. And of course, you know, for all those who are seeking and acquiring understanding, there's all sorts of instruction manuals that we are to look through so we can see how to construct this life that it's speaking of it here in Hebrews. For the law, it's a shadow of things to come. So what is a shadow of things to come? Most people don't even know what the laws are. I made it simple for everybody and I showed you here. This here site, gospeloutreach.net and the /613laws.html, or you can just go in a Google search or whatever and put in there all 613 commandments or all 613 laws, and it'll bring up a whole bunch of pages for you showing you these things. But as stated, you got to be careful with some of the ways that they interpreted these laws. Like the 14th law makes seat on the corners of your tallits. Well, we don't wear tallits. Those are priestly garments. And if you're wearing a tallit and a kippah on your head while you pray, you're denying Messiah. If you pray with your head covered, men, you're denying Messiah. All women should be wearing a head covering when they do pray. All right, so what you want to do then with that child that you have a bicycle or a tricycle built and put away in your basement or in your closet while they learn the instruction manual of the laws of the bike. And when they can recite it, what you do is you say, okay, well, wait a minute right there, young man or young lady. You go in and you get the bicycle or the tricycle and you wheel it out to them and you ask them, say, okay, here is the deal. You could either keep that manual because you showed to me, you know it by heart. You rattled it right off to me. I mean, it even had the picture of the tricycle or bicycle right in the manual. But you reel that shiny red or shiny blue or shiny pink or yellow or whatever's their best light color bike, all assembled, fully assembled, because you painstakingly went through and made sure all the parts were there. I mean, the chain that goes from the sprocket where your foot pedals are to the back sprocket for the back wheel doesn't belong wrapped around the handlebar. If you have it wrapped around the handlebar, the chain is in the manual. The child recited about the chain, but if it's wrapped around the handlebar, the bicycle is useless because you did not follow each and every instruction there was for you to acquire that marvelous gift. However, you tell that child, say, child, listen to me. Here is your choice. You could keep the manual. You got it all memorized in heart. You can go ahead and keep that old manual and I'll keep the bike. Or you can give me back the manual and then you could enjoy, as it says right here in Hebrews 10:1, for the bike manual was a shadow of the righteous bicycle or tricycle to come, but not the very image of the bicycle or tricycle. So, okay, we're at least that far into it. And our Messiah said, If you love me, keep the commandments. If you want life everlasting, keep the commandments. There's not a shortage in the New Testament on passages where it tells you to keep the commandments. But somehow it instantly gets blurred out in all the Christian Canaanites' eyes, all the ones of religions out there. You say it, they can't see it. It's like all those out in the world. Revelation 12:9 said, the whole world's deceived. They can't see that. We can't see exactly what this law that we're learning when our king chose us so we could see we're supposed to keep it. Not everyone can have that yet. That's the duty of the 144,000 and the children of the earth who hear these things. It's their duty to teach people how to read these scriptures. All the earth, everyone of this world is going to end up flowing to the house of Yahweh, the gathering place wherever our king gathers us to. And he's going to send his holy Malachim out to the farthest parts of heaven and to the farthest parts of the earth to gather my other 143,999 brothers and I together. And please watch the video Timothy P. just put out, because these things he spoke of are not going to be there in that place. We'll have our own broadcasting studios where we'll put on shows concerning the scriptures. There's people know how to make movies. They can make movies concerning these scriptures using the proper names and everything. But anyway, you can see now, hopefully, that this law is a shadow of the righteous things to come and not the very image of the things. Shoot, no. Messiah said, they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So that's not part of the image, though it is part of the picture. People can see it all around, but it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with us becoming the image of our Messiah. And the only way you can do it is by walking like he did. The only way someone with a football or basketball or hockey player, god or goddess that they got out there that they know everything about, well, you ain't never going to be a one with a hockey player or basketball or football unless you play the sport and learn to play it as well as they did. Messiah even put down the ground rules. He said, hey, your righteousness had better exceed that of the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, or you're not going to make it into the kingdom. And yet you got all these religions out there teaching everyone that the laws are done away with, and then they try to back it up with things like Hebrews 10:1 that they have no understanding of. But you do right now, I hope. Let's further in this verse. For the law having the shadow of the righteous things to come and not the very image of the things. It wasn't the bicycle all put together yet. You only got the manual. And until that bike was presented, you didn't have the very image of what it was going to be. And it says, can never with these same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year make those who approach perfect. Can't be done. In fact, Messiah, it's speaking of in here, his sacrifice of his blood isn't an animal sacrifice. These animal sacrifices were for those living by the letter of the law. If they went out there and they told a lie or whatever they did that was sinful, they were made known about it because they were most likely trying to hide the fact that they did it. But once found out, they probably have to bring turtle doves if they was poor, or a lamb or a ram or a bull or something they had to bring to be sacrificed. It didn't do away with the sin. It annulled them from the penalty of breaking the law. But with Yahshua's blood, after you start living by the instruction manual and you start overcoming these laws one by one, our Messiah can then wash you of that one law you've been breaking, that one sin. But he doesn't forgive all your sins right at once. It's silly to even think so, my friends. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? Yes, if the sacrifices made you perfect, then it would cease to be offered. The same way with Yahshua in his blood. Here further in Hebrews chapter 10, it says in verse 26, for if we sin willfully, knowingly or intentionally, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, Not the jingle bells junk taught out there in the churches in the world today, but the real truth you hear on our King's channel here. It says there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. If you sin willfully, knowingly, or intentionally, there is no sacrifice for your sin left. If our Messiah washed you cleansed of that sin of adultery, but then you go back to it, you trample on our King's blood. You sinned willfully after you received the knowledge that you weren't supposed to commit adultery anymore, and therefore you got nothing left for you. Our King, with his human precious blood, died one time for you. And if you backslide and fall away, there is no repentance you can do. If you had the knowledge. Right now the whole world's blind. They don't have this knowledge. And those that sin willfully, all they got is a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation, which will devour the adversaries. Anyone who has rejected Moshe's laws dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much worse punishment do you suppose will he be thought worthy who has trampled the Son of Yahweh underfoot, counted the blood of what? The covenant. What is this covenant? Where the laws are written in your heart, your mind, your inward parts, in your DNA. In your every fiber of your DNA, you have got this knowledge of the truth running through you. These every written words in here, we were told to memorize. And I don't mean as, when you open up, in the beginning there was. No, I'm saying memorizing this book is as simple as knowing you must keep the give or take 613 laws or commandments. You must keep the give or take 613 commandments that are in the law so you can keep the 10 commandments. That's all this book says. There's plenty of stories in there about men who did or didn't do it, what took place with them, and even warnings for these last days about what's going to come on your head if you hear the truth and turn away from it. You reject it. It's going to be a horrible thing. It's best you never heard about it at this time. The time of the gathering, everyone's going to hear about it because the holy Malachim are going to go around the entire earth to the farthest parts of the earth, and the holy Malachim will go to the farthest parts of heaven too, proclaiming the truth, the glad tidings to every nation, tongue, to all those places, those lying preachers out there telling you, oh, well, Jesus can't come till we preach to all the peoples and tongues on the earth. It's not even their job. It's the holy Malachim's job. And these liars are blessed right now because they never had the truth. Otherwise, what they're doing would be shown that they counted the blood of the covenant. The covenant, Yahshua's blood is the blood of the covenant. When you go into the veil of that covenant and you start living by this every living word, that's when Messiah's blood, which is over the covenant, you walk through it to get into the covenant. And there are those that counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified, a common thing, and insulted the spirit of pardon and acquittal. Please, if you don't understand who grace is, please do the research, and if you can't get it out your mouth, get yourself a toothbrush and a bar of soap, and every time you say it, just get those gods right out of your mouth. You got to get those gods right out of your mouth. So no, those animals that were sacrificed did not bring perfection. Yahshua's sacrifice does. And he commands you to be perfect as your Father in heaven's perfect. Matthew 5, very last verse. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? For the worshippers, once purified, would have had no more consciousness of sins. But in those sacrifices, these yearly sacrifices, the sacrifices for when they sinned against the letter of the law, but in those sacrifices, which we don't do here on earth today, our King is doing it in the kingdom right now. But in those sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year. Yes, they remembered their sins, but it's been promised. Those that are forgiven by Messiah's blood, by his sacrifice, they won't remember anything. Once the heavens and the earth have been destroyed and made new again, we'll have no memory of anything took place during it that was of a sinful nature. It says, but in those sacrifices there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. No. If you get a pardon and an acquittal from the governor of Texas because you shot somebody and you're on death row to be put to death tomorrow, well, if the judge gives you a pardon and an acquittal, he's not doing away with what you done. He's doing away with the penalty of what you done. In Messiah's blood, not only the penalty, but the sin itself is taken away, because you actually needed the sins in your past to get you to where you are today. Those invisible hands are in everything, my friends. And it shows here in verse 6, in burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you had no pleasure. And why is that? Because our Father wants you to love His law. He wants you to obey it in all things. It's all He ever commanded you to do. There's nothing else He commanded you to do but to live by His every living word. To get out that instruction manual, blow off the dust, and get into it, or use your computer. Go check out these laws, get starting on them today. And Noah says in Malachi 3:6, for I am Yahweh, I do not change. Psalms 55:19, King David knew this. King David and Father Yahweh are at one. Yahshua and David are at one. Yahshua and I and the Father and I are at one. And it says Yahweh will hear and afflict them, even he who abides from of old. Why? Because they do not change. Therefore, they do not fear Yahweh. And in Proverbs, it says that fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge. If you ain't afraid that your Father's going to allow His Son to toss your buns into Gehenna and burn with Satan and her minions forever, well, He'd never do it in the state you're in if you don't know my King. He doesn't want anyone to perish. Neither does our Father. That's the whole purpose of the second resurrection. As well as soon, Holy Spirit's going to be poured out on all flesh. And then there will be a great falling away. But at least everyone on the earth will have a moment to know what true peace is. There's going to be silence in heaven and everything when people actually come to realize that what they have neglected their whole lives and thought nothing of, and threw into porta potties and everything, kicked it around and ripped it up and everything, their contract, their instruction manual, thinking they have no penalty. Well, until you reverse that and start fearing your Father, who can kill both the body and the soul, you should please rethink things. All of y'all that are walking in the truth, my prayers are for y'all. And see here in Proverbs 24 verse 21, it says, my son, fear the Father and the King. Do not associate with those given to change. And it's not talking about your repenting, because you should already be repented if you're hearing that message from King David to those who are in Jerusalem and those of Israel. He wrote the Psalms for them at that time. And he was telling them in the Psalms, don't associate with those who will change from what they're doing, living by the instruction manual, to go off a whoring after the gods. If they do the change of the going off a whoring after the gods, don't associate with them. And watch Timothy P's last video too. If you got any questions, please put them down there. I've been praying y'all get eyes to see, ears to hear, and then we need to get them circumcised, my friends. But I'm here to help you because I love you. And the only reason I love you is because I know who my King is. And I want you to know Him too. He who says I know Him and does not keep His commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Prove that wrong. Nobody showed me a commandment yet that's impossible for me to keep. And so I'm going to go enjoy the Sabbath, editing this and getting it up for you. I hope you enjoy it and pass it on. Send it to friends. I mean, here I even offered a $10,000 reward, and it's only had 69 views. I mean, Satan certainly don't want the truth out there, I'm telling you. So remember, my friends, invisible hands are shaping you in ways you don't even know. But realize, if your computer dies or whatever, it's all in our King's hands. So give him thanks for whatever takes place. And sometimes it works out really well, So I almost forgot to tell y'all, sometimes things work in reverse. If you're giving the very image of the things first, such as I got here with this beautiful Honeywell air conditioner, but it didn't have the instruction manual with it. So what I ended up being like, because in the back of that unit, the one that's running over here behind me now, I didn't realize there were these plugs in there that held the condensation, and what ended up was I had a 4-foot diameter spot on my rug that was sopping wet, and I discovered it when I went to the window to brush my hair. I mean, the water squeezed up between my toes and on the top of my feet. I'm like, what? So let this be to show you, though I had that which was the full image of what I had purchased for $352 plus tax and yada yada, I was really glad to get it. Came early, I hooked it all up, set it all up, no problemo. How much does it take, to get one of these running? Hit the temperature thing, came on, cooled the room, was wonderful. And that, my friends, is like the fella here in Matthew chapter 22:11. Please read this story. It's concerning a number that no man can count, that is going to be the guest there to see my King marrying his bride, which are all the saints and prophets of old, and the 144,000, and all the children of the earth. Y'all are guests. You're invited. But me personally, the way that I look at what took place with this air conditioner, where I got the full thing, not having to read the manual. I did not read the manual on my air conditioner, and neither did this fella read his manual and keep what was in it, because our Messiah says straight out, he says, but when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on the laws and commandments. He didn't have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. If you hear the words that are coming from my mouth, and you can see that there is an instruction manual that you must put together if you want that free gift of salvation. The free gift of salvation, like it says, for the law having a shadow of righteous things to come, and not the very image of things to come. You're going to see it, my friends, when we're gathered. It's going to be a prototype of the kingdom, and when our Messiah reigns on earth with Satan bound for 1,000 years to where she can't cause no one to sin. And at the end of that 1,000 years, once we get the whole earth rebuilt to our King's liking, then he's going to raise up everyone ever lived and died before that never had an opportunity for truth. And Satan will be released, and for 100 years, all that ever lived, the ones that did you rotten your whole life, you watched them grow and they got richer and richer the more they tormented you, they're going to be in a second resurrection. And for 100 years, it's going to take them to prove themselves. And my friends, I've lived 63 years. I'd rather be burned to a crisp and never live again than to have to go through another 100 years of this. So I'm looking forward to the gathering. Please pray for the gathering. Any questions, comments, please write. Keep it clean. Enoch said, I'm a guide. Go take a look at what Timothy P. had just put up there, and you'll probably understand these scriptures. Now that you read them, you'll be able to see these things with much more clarity than the muddied waters that the preachers on the earth today defiled and feed the flock. With that, I love y'all. Bye.